Okay.
We should be live now. Okay.
I gotta pull it up and see it. And if
Just
we're,
trying to see the delay.
when you see that we're on, greet them and anybody that's already on.
I don't think we're as choppy as before, so that's good.
That's a good thing.
Okay. And then, do you need the link? You want the link to drop on the website, or do you
No,
have it?
they just know to go to
Okay.
the website, I think.
Okay. I think
We
people
just
are
have one.
starting to. We have
Yeah,
two on
I'm one
concurrent.
of them.
Oh, okay. I don't know if I'm the other one. Whoever's on, can you guys let us know if our audio is coming through all right?
I heard a snippet of the volume. Um, Rick is confirming, but I heard a snippet of it before I put it to mute
Perfect.
so I didn't mess up the echo effect.
Perfect. Okay.
So
So,
give it about another 20 or 30 seconds for everybody, because I think, I don't know with live stream if everybody's getting pushed a commercial or two or 10 before they can
I,
join.
I don't think it's like Twitch where there are commercials. I could be wrong on that though.
Um, if you don't have premium,
Oh, maybe.
you might get, usually with any video, you're going to get a commercial, but with live stream, I don't know if that's the case. So we can see if the numbers start pop. Yeah, they're starting to pop in now. Tim
Yeah.
is here. Appreciate that. And Rick confirming. So people are
Yeah.
starting to drop in.
So I think we can get started, RC, and then people
Yeah.
will trickle in. So, um, we're gonna dive into several topics similar to the video we dropped last week, except this is the live format. Feel free to drop feedback to us if our audio is ever choppy, if our live stream is a little laggy. I know during the draft it was a little off, so hopefully our new settings are a little better. But without further ado, RC, first agenda item. You wanted to talk about some news on rookie QBs, and you specifically pointed out Bo Nix and Drake May. What's going on with them?
Just tonight, I wanted to record just a couple note items that I got from either some of my sources on the ground in these areas, and not the sexy kind that you would think, like I've got some connection with the GMs or stuff like that. My connections are more the towel boys, the ball boys, the cousins of somebody who's got invited to see their cousin low level playing and let me know that they were going. They'll send me some bootleg video. So I get all kinds of random hotline tips on things from our subscribers and friends of the channel. So I had a collection of notes for the week that some of them I saw firsthand, and then some of them's just discussion from sources to kind of throw out there because I think they're interesting pieces for not only for fantasy dynasty purposes, but also there's some betting potential within this information, depending on how accurate it is. So with that, the first note is on Drake May, Bo Nix, and what I um, attempted to do this past week because it intrigued me based on a conversation I had a couple of days ago and I wanted to follow up with other sources to see if they were seeing the same things. But in the football news, there's kind of a Drake May is not having a great rookie camp, or didn't have a great rookie camp, and he's running third team in the OTAs now that they've got everybody in. I can confirm that that is true, that he is running third team. But what I was struck with was my sources saying that he is getting that third team treatment. There's no special handling. There's no push to get him going. The things I see Coach Mayo talking about with him, it's very almost Belichick-esque. He's worse than Bill Belichick of, how May's got things he needs to work on and this, that, and the other. Definitely not special treatment. I have no vibes that New England's in any hurry to push him, get excited, hype him up, what have you. They're taking the different coaching approach of starting him down low and maybe letting him work his way up. But the sound bites, the things I hear Mayo talking about, it's not very exciting. I'm not saying that they're already down on him and they're regretting it. It's just like, do you want to sell some tickets here, or do you want to get people excited? Like, what are you doing? So he's definitely getting a certain type of treatment. But what really intrigued me was the contrast of everybody sending me notes about how Sean Payton and Bo Nix are like two grade school lovers with each other. I mean, Sean Payton is effusive with his, I guess lover is probably a bad term for middle school kids. So let's say puppy love, crushes, secret crushes. He is effusive with his praise about Bo Nix. Bo Nix is wherever Sean Payton is, Bo Nix seems to be within earshot. A totally different treatment for Bo Nix. And I am getting the feeling just from the whole vibe and things that people are telling me that it is quite possible that Bo Nix is going to be the week 1 starter. I didn't believe that going into this post-draft world. I figured it would for sure be Jarrett Stidham. And Stidham is the first team. Stidham's working as the first team quarterback. They've said he's going into OTAs, he's the first team quarterback. But they've gone out of their way to say it's going into OTAs that he's the first team quarterback. He may not even leave the OTAs maybe as the first team quarterback. I don't think Bo Nix probably won't make his move until the real training camps begin, but it looks like the door is wide open for Bo Nix to start the season. And where that's important is I see the betting lines for rookies, what rookie quarterback is going to lead all the rookies in passing yards is a thing you can bet on. And I've bet a lot on Jade Daniels and sprinkled some around on everybody else besides Caleb Williams. So basically betting against Caleb Williams, betting for Jaden Daniels, because they're definitely both starting for their teams. Everybody else, Nix, May, Penix, they're up for grabs of whether they're going to start. It might take an injury or whatever, but that's why they have the longer shot odds. Bo Nix has longer shot odds, but he may be the only other rookie quarterback to start week 1, and then if he's starting week 1 at the odds that he's at for leading and passing yards, it becomes an interesting option for those that are inclined to bet on such things. So
we kind of knew this, right, RC? Because Drake May, everybody talked about how like he needed time to develop and whatnot, and Bo Nix, Sean Payton handpicked him, right? Like he kind of fits the system there. Not to say that Mayo didn't handpick May, but it just felt like Bo Nix was a more ready-made product, spent a lot more time in college too. So I'm not surprised that he's closer to starting versus Drake May.
You are not surprised, and I am not surprised. But let me click onto it just to get the real numbers. Um, the betting market is apparently unfazed by all of this because Bo Nix's odds have actually worsened in the last couple weeks to lead all rookie quarterbacks in passing yards. Caleb is at plus 100. Jaden's at plus 250. Who do you think is third?
I would have to say JJ.
JJ McCarthy plus 350 to lead that group. I wish
He's
I could
not even a
that.
lock to start. Darnold's probably going to win out.
He's not a lock to start, and even if he was, he ain't going to beat out those other guys unless they get hurt. So McCarthy is third at pretty decent. I mean, can you imagine Jaden Daniels is at plus 250 and JJ McCarthy is at plus 350? The gap of those two should be miles, millions of miles deep, long.
100%.
But they're really right behind each other, 2-3. Then Bo Nix is fourth at plus 800. So
that I would take.
If the whole vibe with Sean Payton is really true, that plus 800 is quite interesting. Then May's at plus 1600. So it's really, they're seeing Caleb, Daniels, and McCarthy, then a big drop off to Nix. But I think Nix deserves, if Nix is starting week 1, he could win that outright. Just because 100%. Of the situation that he's in. And I believe in Jaden Daniels over Caleb Williams. I believe in Bo Nix over Caleb Williams. But Jaden Daniels is going to run a lot. I don't know that he's going to throw for swashbuckling passing yards. I think he'll do fine. And he'll beat Caleb potentially, unless Caleb garbage times his way through it. But Bo Nix is the one that could be the real quarterback that racks the most yards because he's not running for as much yardage like Jaden would be. So that was my first one.
His offensive weapons are obviously not as great as someone like JJ McCarthy, but he has an offensive-minded coach in Sean Payton. He's going to get pushed. He's in a weaker division, right? As opposed to JJ McCarthy that has to go up against the Packers, the Bears on the road, or even the Lions who have a really strong defense. So, yeah, I love that plus 800 relative to everybody else. I'm not saying that Nix is going to do it. It's just great odds.
Yeah, I thought it's interesting enough that I wanted to put it out there for our bettors for sure.
RC, remind me, how do you handle the Q&A format here? Do you take questions at the end or do you take them as they come?
Sometimes I'll do some of both, but let's do the news. Let's get the news out of the way. Then we'll handle all the questions. Unless there's a specific comment or question about what we're talking about, then you can interject that one in.
Okay.
But for the other ones, we'll wait till we bum rush through this news.
Okay, let's move to the second topic you had on our agenda, and that's a Carolina Panthers note. RC, are you seeing something bullish for the Panthers? Because I think I saw a tweet. I can't remember where that like Bryce Young and Deontay Johnson are connecting or something. I don't know if that was a puff piece for them, but what are you hearing?
I would say a puff piece, just like Canales is so excited about how accurate Bryce Young is. All I can think of is flashbacks to this time last year when everybody was saying the same exact thing, and then it's so worthless to try to scout these guys when they're in shorts and a t-shirt throwing the ball against no coverage and no pass pressure. It's the number one thing. You want to know the main reason why the NFL always gets their scouting wrong. And I see it when I go to the Senior Bowl, seen it for over a decade, and it's true in the NFL. They watch these guys in shorts and a t-shirt at the combine, at Senior Bowl practices, and at OTAs and all of that, whether it's analysts, scouts, GMs, they look at them and they see them at their best with the least amount of pressure, and they fall in love, and they think, oh, look at the way they're running the plays and they're reading the defenses. They're playing 7-on-7 at best, and if they play 11-on-11, the quarterbacks have a red jersey on. They know they're not going to get touched. That's completely different for when the bullets are flying. It happens that way in the Senior Bowl every year. Quarterbacks look a certain way during the practices, and then all of a sudden when they have some live contact, or now just the game is live contact, everything falls apart. So Bryce Young is getting all the flowers and praises thrown at him again by his own team. But my note on this is who he's not getting praises thrown by is mostly the media at large, but the NFL is turning its back on Bryce Young. They have already given up. I didn't realize when going through the schedules the first time, I was just looking at matchups, Carolina does not have one primetime game scheduled. Not a Thursday night Amazon, not a Sunday night, not a Monday night. The number one pick, the guy that they all said was the best quarterback in that draft last year, a year later, can't even draw a primetime game in the NFL because the NFL is giving up on him. That didn't happen with Trevor. I don't think it happened with Trevor. That usually doesn't happen. They still have a candle lit for those guys, figuring they're going to turn it around. But not Bryce Young. He's already being shut out, and I've heard that from a couple of people that the NFL is just like, we are moving on. We're not giving into this nonsense. So the only positive things you'll see on Bryce Young is coming from his coach, the owner, or his wide receivers hoping to get targets. And I see the occasional fantasy analyst will have Bryce Young as their sleeper of 2024, bottom fishing for it, still holding on to hope from what they were suckered with last year. But just wanted to note, you will not be pestered with being able to watch Bryce Young in prime time in 2024 because he didn't make it.
So for me, RC, I think the reason why that happened is the way he face planted, right? Trevor wasn't amazing his rookie year. That's not an understatement.
It was really bad. It was worse than Bryce Young.
Would you say he was worse than Bryce Young, though?
Yeah, I think I'm going off of memory. I'll look up the numbers while you finish your point.
Yeah.
But I think they were pretty horrific numbers his rookie season that gets totally wiped away because he's a golden child. 12 touchdowns, 17 interceptions.
Yeah, that's pretty awful. But I mean, I think like Bryce's stature is working against him too, right? Like Trevor looks like a quarterback. Bryce never did. So it's like, okay, now you have the visual confirmation that he shouldn't have even been there, right?
Bryce Young, 11 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. So he did have more touchdowns than interceptions, where Trevor completely face planted out of the gate. But it looked different, and everybody thought he was generational. I'm just here to say the NFL is not seeing anything in Bryce Young. They are not putting him in any type of prime position. That kind of hides him from more embarrassment, because if they were to put him in on prime time, you got to puff up the show, you got to puff up the players, you got to puff up the storylines. And if Bryce Young is collapsing again, they're not going to want to talk about that. That's not going to be any fun if Carolina stinks. And then Bryce Young, their golden child, they'll have to go on all pregame about how terrible he is, when a year ago they were telling us he was one of the great quarterbacks that anybody had ever seen. So just a quick note on that, just for my own amusement.
And I think they have an international game, but I don't think we want to call a 9 a.m. Eastern start prime time. They're technically the only
put
game.
Him on. That's like perfect to hide him from the West Coast.
Get him out of the DFS slates too. I love it. But But yeah, I mean, when I think about QBs throwing in like shorts and no pads and whatever, I always think about like Zach Wilson and how like he was just so like publicized at how good he looked throwing during the combine or whatever. Those are like the images I get. So, not to say that like Zach Wilson's on Bryce Young's level. I mean, I guess they're at this point maybe comparable, but Zach Wilson was.
Hold on. I got to come out and defend here and make sure that I'm not always conveniently on the right side of history on everything. I liked Zach Wilson. I still have a candle lit for Zach Wilson. And when you watch him throw in shorts and a t-shirt or in pads, he's really talented. That Kansas City Chiefs game, was it a Thursday night or a Monday night game last year where the Jets were on their way to beating Kansas City, and Wilson had totally outplayed Mahomes. Mahomes had like 3 picks in the game. Wilson had what looked like his breakout party against the Chiefs, but there was a bad call late in the game, shocker, that went Kansas City's way to keep a drive going, and then I think they were able to score a touchdown from it. I think is the way that game ended up going. But Zach Wilson was awesome during that game. Zach Wilson has all the tools. What you can't get is what's inside their head when the bullets are flying. And I still think Zach Wilson's got something to work with, but I don't want to talk about it too much because I don't think we're ever going to see it, because I think he's got some off-field distractions as part of his issue.
Yeah, and that's the thing, RC. Like, sometimes these QBs just don't land in favorable situations. As like, for example, like Drake May, right? He's in a horrible like infrastructure to grow offensively and work on those tendencies that that he had in college. So maybe Drake May with Kevin O'Connell could have been something, but I'm really low on him with the Patriots, for example.
Can I say this? Because I'm done with Kevin O'Connell. So let me just
completely out on him.
Okay, let me just go. I thought when I studied his background and saw his communication skills and the way that he talked in his press conferences, he felt like he gets it. He's a great communicator. Looked like he was going to be a great young head coach. I was all in on how I would want him to be, my head coach, and he may very well be a good head coach, but I cannot stand by and watch what the Minnesota Vikings have done at quarterback since he and that GM took over. And the reason I'm all fired up about this is I would like to not reveal that I've been studying something on this, so I have the information right in front of me. I'd be better to just play it like this is just the information floating around in my head that just came up. But you didn't know that when you brought up the Minnesota thing. But let me just put this Kevin O'Connell thing out before you praise him. Here's what the Kevin O'Connell and the GM, who I think is a disaster, have done at quarterback since they took over. Their first move was to sign Nick Mullins in free agency to a low-level deal. That's neither here nor there. That's not great. But then a month later, they drafted Jaron Hall, who was arguably the worst rookie quarterback that got drafted last year. Looks terrible. Their next move was in mid-season 2023. They traded for Josh Dobbs, who was playing really good football for the Arizona Cardinals. And when they traded for him, when Cousins got hurt, everybody's like, man, what a smart move. Dobbs goes from being pretty decent in Arizona to being a disaster in Minnesota under Kevin O'Connell. So then we flip. So then they bench Dobbs, go to Mullins, go to Hall, who's a disaster, put Mullins back in because Hall's a disaster, and they continue to lose games, and they lose their way out of the playoff picture. Fast forward to 2024, they're so smart they're going to let Kirk Cousins get away from them because they're going to come up with a better plan. So what's their better plan? They sign the sucker bet quarterback of the century, the Bryce Young before there was a Bryce Young, Sam Darnold, to a $10 million 1-year deal. If I want to know who doesn't know anything about quarterbacks, I just need to know the head coaches that are pursuing Sam Darnold to be a starting quarterback. It's bad enough that Kyle Shanahan brought him in as a backup, but for Sam Darnold to be being brought in as a starter is just in this day and age is ridiculous. So, but that's what Minnesota does. They get rid of Kirk Cousins, but they do sign Sam Darnold. Then they trade up for the other backup quarterback coming from this NFL draft in J.J. McCarthy. They have to trade up to pick him in the top 10 when he's probably not even a top 100 overall talent, and he's not a franchise quarterback. So all I've seen is them take quarterbacks and either make them worse, let the good one get away, sign the sucker bet ones, drafted the sucker bet one. They would have been the same group. If they had the number 1 pick last year, they would have took Bryce Young instead of C.J. Stroud, just like most of the NFL would have. I am so out on Kevin O'Connell and that GM because they can't get the quarterback thing right. Everything they're doing at quarterback to me is crushing that franchise. So What were you going to say nice about Kevin O'Connell?
So I was going to say that he got 400-yard games out of someone like Nick Mullins. So let's see what he could do with a Sam Darnold or J.J. McCarthy. But it doesn't sound like you're willing to go there.
Yeah, that part is just that could be possible if they throw it, as many times as Mullins did. You could get 3 touchdowns and 4 or 5 picks as Mullins was in games with your 300 yards and your losses. So that's at least some hope for Justin Jefferson and crew.
And what I want, for those of you that are interested on the Vikings outlook, what you guys should do is pop open their schedule, find a game that you think they can win weeks 1 through 10. There's literally only one on that schedule, and that's week 1 against the Giants. If they drop that, they could literally start the season 0-10. There's really no team that they could stack up with on their schedule because they have a really tough road. So, I mean, I don't know that they'll probably give KOC another year, right? Could he get fired in season?
Yeah. I don't know if they're going to blame. I don't think they will because they'll be the give them a chance, give them another year with a full year of J.J. McCarthy and everything will be fine. But it's not going to be fine. And then that's when people need to get their heads chopped off. But if Darnold is a disaster right off the bat, and then they are forced to go to J.J. McCarthy in desperation too early, and then he comes in as a total flop in an era where rookie quarterbacks are walking in and doing fine, there might be some pressure. But the longer he can keep that J.J. McCarthy off the field buys him more time into next year that he just needs a full year as the starter and everything's going to be fine. But what they've done at quarterback, the decisions that they've made, is going to get them fired in either this year, but most likely next year.
It's not only the quarterback. I mean, I know you're not high on Dallas Turner either when they traded up. So, and they don't have, I don't think they have a second round next year too. So they traded away a lot for this year. We'll see where that takes them. But I'm similar. I'm not as low on KOC as you are, but just the Vikings' general trend, yes, I'm with you that they're probably on the way down. And I don't, aside from Jordan Addison, I can't name you one guy that GM's drafted since he got there that has done anything really positive for that team. I apologize if I missed anyone besides him. But anyways, RC, are we ready to transition to a more positive topic?
Enough talking about the Carolina Panthers.
And the Vikings.
We can move on to topic number 3. I don't know how the Panthers thing turned into the Vikings, but I think the Vikings may end up having a worse record than the Panthers this year.
And now,
To bring
RC, you
up full
finally
circle.
get to, instead of ragging on teams, you're finally. I'm gonna throw you.
You
I'm gonna
forced it
set
on
you
me.
up. Hey, yeah, I putting the Vikings out there was on me. My bad. Okay, so RC, there is a QB and wide receiver where you're seeing a pretty good connection from OTA videos and whatnot. Who is it, and would you have expected this? I guess before the draft or even during the at any point in the off season.
I'll preface it with I get some tape sent to me from people's cell phones from OTAs, but then there's stuff on YouTube. So there's video in various places that I get to watch what some of the quarterbacks are doing or the team in general, but it's usually you're watching the offense from my perspective, especially looking at fantasy things. Want to see who they're throwing to. What just kind of what are the wide receiver trio configurations and just generally what do things look like. So I've seen some, not all, of the various OTAs. So this is a limited honor that I'm about to give, and it's just passing along a thought. Of all the rookies I've seen involved on OTA tape, watching them in basic drills and then 7-on-7s, or some have 11-on-11s that I've seen. Of all the rookies, whether quarterback or wide receiver, of all the rookies involved things that I've watched in the passing game, the best thing that I have seen so far, and that's granted, it's OTAs, it's non-contact, all that kind of stuff. I have been impressed by Justin Herbert to Lad McConkey already in the OTAs, which warms my heart to unparalleled levels. So I want to see it, but I was looking at it to say, okay, let me see what this looks like. When I saw like Xavier Worthy in rookie camp, I was like, oh boy, here we go with him. But watching McConkey make his cuts off the snap, cutting across to Herbert's field of vision, and then Herbert putting his, a laser beam throw on him. I just liked of all of the things that I've watched, that's been the best rookie involved wide receiver thing that I've seen, where a wide receiver is so prominent for his quarterback at such an early stage of the process, which makes sense because the Chargers have a bunch of mediocre to hot garbage at wide receiver otherwise. So, but you never know if the coach is going to hold back the rookies or what they're going to do. But I saw a lot of Herbert McConkey.
I wish you let me guess what you were going to say, because I would have went there.
Oh,
but one thing I wanted to ask you, Arsen, and I think I've asked you this in the past. You view Ladd as the Keenan replacement, not Mike. Like, you see him playing a similar sort of role that Keenan did for Herbert, right?
Yeah, kind of the Keenan or Amon-Ra St. Brown is what comes to my mind, in that the Amon-Ra is great in and of himself, way better than I ever thought he could be. But some of that greatness, some of that goodness comes from the Lions have had nothing to compete with him getting a connection with Jared Goff. It's so important that the quarterback have that, or that the wide receiver have the quarterback's attention so much that it launches them to fantasy stardom. So there are other great wide receivers that are on teams where they're completely buried because of the quarterback play or passing game, with a veteran quarterback who already had long-term established relationships with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. There was no way Jackson Smith and Jigba was going to just show up and be the number one guy and be a fantasy breakout star. There's no way Jordan Addison was going to ever get over Justin Jefferson. So even if you believed in those guys, it's not a great situation for them to land in. McConkey is in the Amon-Ra situation where it's him. He's so clearly the best receiver of the group. The quarterback's almost forced to have to use him and overuse him. So, but I was pleased to see that there's signs of it already happening in camp.
It's like he has all the opportunity in the world. He plays in a dome, and on top of it, he has a really good QB too. It's like you have all those positive indicators with Ladd that it's like he's probably in redraft leagues, RC. Like, I've seen him go pretty late. Like, that's a really good value to grab him. One thing I wanted to ask you for the Dynasty rookie drafts, if you had one overall and you were to pick one person and you couldn't trade him away, so you can't just take like Marvin Harrison Jr. and trade him and get more assets. If you had to pick one person that has to stay on your roster for eternity, who would it be? Would it be him?
I would have to say it would probably be McConkey.
Wow, that's great. I mean, I'm high on him too. I'm not as familiar with Dynasty as much as you are, but yeah, that's pretty cool.
There are other wide receivers I have graded in his range, team before they got onto their teams, pre-draft wise. There's other, Malik Neighbors is phenomenal. There are other guys right in that same range, but Malachi Corley is not going to be the number one target for the Jets, no matter how much I love him. And Roman Wilson is not as good as George Pickens, no matter how much I love him. But Roman Wilson's pretty good, but he's also stuck with Russell Wilson and/or Justin Fields.
And Arthur Smith.
And Arthur Smith. So it's kind of with McConkey, I already loved him, but if he would have been the one to land on Seattle last year, or he would have been the one to land wherever you want to put him for a bad landing spot, like if he went to the Dallas Cowboys, he wouldn't get past CeeDee Lamb. That already puts him in a different box than I would want him to be in to get that excited to say, oh, this is the guy I would take and draft for eternity. And if next year they sign a big name wide receiver in free agency, it still doesn't rattle me as much for the long term because he's already got himself established with the quarterback, kind of like Amon-Ra. If Amon-Ra hadn't landed in Detroit, if he had landed in Seattle 2023, or he had landed with whatever knucklehead quarterbacks, if he had landed with the Jets, or we wouldn't even, we'd go, that guy's pretty good. We wouldn't think of him as one of the best wide receivers in fantasy or in the NFL.
Yeah, fair point. Okay.
So McConkey is just situationally perfect. A top-tier elite quarterback, arguably the most talented tools quarterback in the league. And McConkey lands on that depth chart with everybody else getting washed out. It'd be like if Jackson Smith and Jigba, who's not anywhere near as talented as McConkey, if he had landed in Seattle when they just traded away Metcalf and Lockett right before he got there.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, we're definitely going to be talking about him a lot in the summer, but for those of you with Dynasty rookie drafts coming up, definitely someone you want to target there. RC, next item, Deuce Vaughn. What are you hearing about him? Could he push Zeke on the depth chart?
I don't think that's going to happen, but the reason for the Deuce topic is there is some news breaking, some roto blurbs that Dallas is working him in the slot and that he could be a slot wide receiver. Like how many times are you going to make me fall for that? Like, Tony Pollard was going to be working the slot for like 2 years before he became a real running back. So they always were dangling that, oh, they're working him in the slot. Oh, he might be a slot wide receiver. That'd be so crazy. Nyheim Hines is going to be a slot wide receiver. It never happens. It's not going to happen with Deuce Vaughn. I'm sure they can have him run some routes like that. Is decent in the passing game, but he's going to be a running back. So is a two point thing for Deuce. One is I'm not buying this slot stuff at all. Two, I am buying that he's part of the equation that Dallas is looking at, where they feel like they don't have to go out and pursue any of these running backs, that they are comfortable with Elliott, Dowdle, and Vaughn. Whether people agree with that or not, they feel comfortable. And some people would go, okay, yeah, they have history with Zeke, I get it. And yeah, McCarthy loves Dowdle, so I guess that makes sense. But even though that seems very risky, I see that. But it's like Deuce Vaughn, people don't even remember he's on the Dallas Cowboys. I'm saying he's very much a part of the Dallas Cowboys, and I think he's part of the reason why they don't feel like they have to go out and chase. They didn't chase any running backs in the draft. Everybody, I see a note every other day after the draft. Oh, they were going to draft this running back, but they got such and such took them right beforehand. Or then they were going to do this, but then such and such took them. They had plenty of opportunities to take all kinds of running backs, and they took anything but that. And then the next round then the fourth round would come up, and there'd be all these running backs, and some of them would go in front of them. Some of them were still left, and they take a guard or they take a linebacker. Then in the fifth round, like, okay, Dallas has really got to take a running back here. Let's look at the available running backs. And then they take a DB or they take an offensive lineman. It's like they never panicked the entire draft for getting a running back. It's because they knew that they were going to sign Zeke all along. But they have confidence in Dowdle, but I believe they still have high hopes for Deuce Vaughn, and the whole slot receiver thing only, to me, helps keep me engaged with it, that they know he's a valuable member in at least the passing game, but they also like him for as small as he is. They love how he blocks in the passing game. So we have not heard the last of Deuce Vaughn. I'm shocked he went from preseason god to complete ghost, but that could change this year.
Am I crazy for being high on Zeke this year, RC? Because I feel like that. I know Deuce Vaughn's obviously there too, but it just feels like he's going to get a lot of carries, and he's going pretty late as well in some redraft leagues. Like, how are you feeling about his prospects in 2024?
For weeks ahead of the draft, I was urging everybody to grab Ezekiel Elliott if he was either available on waivers for your dynasty, if you were able to claim him, but if he was still kind of hung over from his New England run at the end of last year and he was still on a roster, but people were mocking him, he wasn't even on a team, like it'd be a perfect time to swoop in and steal him for nothing off of someone else's team. Just get him, because I thought Dallas would draft a younger running back, but that they were definitely going to sign Ezekiel Elliott to be a part of something. So Elliott back to Dallas was going to be worth something than the zero he was worth on April 1st. He's only more valuable now that they didn't draft any running backs, but the reason I was interested in Elliott before the draft and then again after the draft was I thought he played some really good football in New England with a Tennessee Titan-esque terrible offensive line, maybe worse than Tennessee's because of injury, among other things. He was carrying that team later in the season. He had some really nice numbers. He didn't have great yardage metrics on expected yards per carry nonsense stat that they have, but all the guys who play behind terrible offensive lines always have these bad running metrics, and then everybody goes, "Oh, look at their toast, bad running metrics." So you can see it's over for Derrick Henry, it's over for Ezekiel Elliott, Rashad White's terrible. He needs to be a third down back. Look at them. It's the offensive line. It's not the running back. So everybody changed their tune quick on Derrick Henry now that he's with Baltimore, but they don't seem to be changing their tune on Ezekiel Elliott back to Dallas. I think it's a great landing spot, and he's going to be the lead back to some degree. The other guys are going to get their work too, but Elliott's going to lead the way until they do something else, if they sign or trade or whatever, but they don't seem to be in any hurry to do so. I think they're comfortable with that trio.
So Dallas's offensive line, obviously, they're not world beaters up there, not what they used to be a few years back, but definitely an upgrade over New England. On top of it, in New England, you have Bailey Zappi or Mac Jones throwing the ball with defenses stacking the box, trying to stop Zeke, and he didn't maybe have the best yards per carry, but he was still productive. So I'm excited to see what he does behind that offensive line, back with Dak, who is an above-average quarterback in the NFL with an outside threat, CeeDee Lamb, so he could definitely have some good production. RC, are we ready for the final topic? Or?
And they drafted Tyler Guyton, who's good, and then they drafted Cooper Beebe, who's also probably going to be a starter sooner rather than later. So they've kind of restocked the offensive line, so he's going to already a better place, whether they drafted those guys or not, because New England's a complete dumpster fire. But Dallas addressing their offensive line with a couple of smart picks with an already solid offensive line in place is going to be a good spot for him, even if it's just for volume.
If it's anything that Dallas does, they definitely know how to draft offensive line really well. So let's see where they
love Zeke. It's not like they're looking at Zeke as this old veteran that tumbled in. Let's see if we can squeeze any juice out of Dalvin Cook. It's not that. They love Ezekiel Elliott.
That's definitely true. Well, RC, final topic on the agenda before you hit the chat's questions, because I'm sure people are excited for you to answer that as well. Brian Thomas, wide receiver that was drafted by Jacksonville, I think 23 or 22 overall. How's he doing with Trevor Lawrence? I know that's not the best quarterback in the world to land with, but I know, just speaking for myself, I was really high on Brian Thomas. He's really fast, really big. What are you seeing, RC?
I wanted to note him because he would have been my number 2 wide receiver that I saw connected with a quarterback. Just how smooth it looked. Part of that on the talent of the wide receiver, and again, they're mostly throwing against no defense of what I'm looking at. So, but just watching a better than your standard fare, everybody line up and the receivers one by one run deep routes, and the quarterback is, throwing half speed, under no pressure throws. There's that kind of practice tape, and then there's more play-based 7-on-7, 11-on-11, where you can see guys kind of work and weave their way through traffic and all of that. Again, because it's no contact and there's no pass pressure, all the advantage to the quarterbacks and the receivers. But what I did see of Brian Thomas just reminded me how silky smooth a receiver that he is. And I was doing some work. I had all that Minnesota quarterback stuff teed up because I was doing some work on some Minnesota Vikings things for a report that's going to come out, I think, tomorrow. And I was caught some Justin Jefferson tape, And I'm watching Justin Jefferson, and I'm like, he is really unbelievable. He is really, everybody knows how great he is, but to for me to sit back and just kind of watch him at work, even with a Nick Mullins, I just had a new appreciation or a reappreciation or whatever you want to call it. Like, man, he is just so damn good. And then in the midst of all of that, I got some Brian Thomas tape, and I was watching that, and I was going, he looks a lot like Justin Jefferson, Brian Thomas. The way he moves, the way he can go up for contested passes from crappy quarterbacks. I mean, there was a lot of Nick Mullins throwing garbage out to Justin Jefferson for Justin Jefferson to have to make some adjustment play, whether that's diving to the ground, whether that's jumping up over two people, whatever it was, he was doing it. And I see Brian Thomas, obviously they're not in any type of contact in OTAs, but just watching Thomas weave around everybody, and he is definitely the best high point receiver in this draft. Maybe the best high point catcher of a football with his body positioning and his hands and his leaping ability that probably I have ever seen. I can't think of anybody who that's better. So I just wanted to put out there for a little bit of tease that, man, Brian Thomas has some Justin Jefferson in him.
That's a really interesting comp, RC. The first time I saw Brian Thomas, I mean, I thought, like, I'm not saying he's going to be Julio Jones, but that's kind of like who I equated him to at the high end of his range. If this guy just pans out all pro, what would he look like? I thought, from my Falcons, Julio, he was that size. He also was pretty smooth with his route running as well. Who are you, like, RC, if this guy just hits it, do you think he's going to be closer to a Justin Jefferson type of receiver?
I think that's his upside. He's known more for, hey, race down the sidelines and try to beat your guy. We'll throw you the football, and you try to make some type of phenomenal catch if you're not fully pulled away from coverage. And then when we get down in the red zone, we're definitely throwing you alley-oops because you're the Dennis Rodman of wide receivers that's going to body position your way into catching those fade passes. I don't rule out that Brian Thomas doesn't wind up the best wide receiver of this draft class. Now, I could also say that about 5 or 6 other guys, not one of them Marvin Harrison. To me, Brian Thomas is what everybody thinks Marvin Harrison is, but he isn't. But Brian Thomas is. And he was used in a certain way in LSU because they had Malik Neighbors to do all the other stuff. So Brian Thomas could be the smart. You want that athlete running downfield, being a deep ball target and a jump ball guy in the end zone. That's how you use them, and that's how Jaden Daniels did use them. He has an upside to be maybe a receiver all around the field. I need to see that to believe it because I haven't seen it in college, but I don't think I'm not necessarily believing it's because he can't do it. He may have just not been put in that role or position because Malik Neighbors existed and Malik Neighbors took that role.
And let's not forget your rule, RC. There are receivers that left Jacksonville too, where now there's an opening for him, right? No more Calvin Ridley. Zay Jones is gone. You have Christian Kirk on one side, but he's more slot receiver-ish. So you're gonna have Thomas as the outside receiver.
Thomas will be the outside receiver, but Thomas, if they choose to, they could put him in a Jefferson type role of just weaving in and out of the interior and exterior when he wanted to. But part of Justin Jefferson's charm is he's so great going over the middle as well. A lot of wide receivers won't go there, and when they do, they drop passes because they're afraid, they're looking to take the hit, or they're just not comfortable doing it. I don't know if that's going to be true of Brian Thomas or not, so that's the wait and see part. But when I watch him, I'm like, he's got such immense physical gifts, And I know he's already can be great as the outside guy, and that's probably where they'll pigeonhole him, just because that's been his MO. But if they ever expand him out, if he's got that ability, if he proves that in training camp, and I'll be watching for it when training camp gets more serious and when we get into the August preseason. But just wanted to put a note out there that he's looking good, and watching a little bit more Justin Jefferson, I can see some of the comparisons potentially.
All right. Okay, let's move on to questions from the chat. I'll tee them up for you, RC. First one is from Jim Hensler. Any reason to cling to Kadarius Toney? Want to drop him in favor of Jared Wiley, TCU tight end, going into Casey, who could possibly be a Kelsey replacement? That was my commentary, not Jim's. Just so he doesn't say why are you pretending to be me or whatever. But my wide receiver group isn't deep. Best are McLaurin, McConkey, Mooney. Tight ends are Ingram, Woods, Jawan Johnson. 6-point PPR Superflex Dynasty. RC, what do you think?
I'll take this in two different silos. One, is there any reason to cling to Kadarius Toney? No, I think he's about pushed his way out of the NFL. I suspect Kansas City will probably cut him. I don't know what Kansas City is doing with the Kadarius Toney, Rashee Rice, and Marquise Brown collection. I mean, those are three of the, try to find another word for it, but I'll just use the one that came to my mind. Those are three of the worst acting wide receivers you could put on one team. I don't know why they're collecting these knucklehead wide receivers. They can't be good for each other. In fact, the other day, there was I don't have a background in who this person is, so I could get something wrong, but some notorious rapper was at the workout with Rashee Rice and Marquise Brown, and they took pictures. But this guy is just out of jail. He was in a gunfight on the interstate, and I think was put in jail because of it, and just got released like after serving some time. I think, I don't know all the details, but that's the type of person we're talking about. And he's hanging out with Rashee Rice and Marquise Brown, of which, I mean, if Rashee Rice could hang around any worse people every week, he sets a new mark for it every week that goes by. He baffles me more with the decisions he's making. I'm like, who is in charge in Kansas City that's letting all of this happen? But they're winning Super Bowl, so what do I know? But Kadarius Toney is dead. If he can't make it in Kansas City, he's not going to make it anywhere. And it's not that he didn't have the talent. He just didn't have the brain. So you'll see him, the next thing we'll see him in is in a jail or on some celebrity weird show where he's trying to get some money off his 5 minutes of fame. To drop in favor of Jared Wiley, I'm pro Jared Wiley. You have a good tight end group, so it's not a huge need. But to the basic question of whether I'd want Wiley or Toney, I'd want Wiley, because come September 53-man roster, Wiley's going to be on it and Toney is not. And even if Toney is, he's not. They're not bringing in all of these wide receivers because they're in love with Kadarius Toney. So I think Kadarius Toney is got one foot in the football grave.
I mean, for me, Wiley has a more clear path to becoming a fantasy football relevant player, whereas Toney, you could have Rice injured, you could have Marquise Brown injured or out, suspended, whatever, and still Toney wouldn't get in probably with the starting unit. It would take maybe 6 receivers going down before he's a starting receiver for KC, because you still have LRZ. I think LRZ probably passes him up on the depth chart.
Tony's had a great situation in Kansas City with bad wide receivers. Rashee Rice as a rookie wide receiver, where Tony should have just taken the reins and been the guy. And not only was he not that, he just sunk lower and lower in snap counts and targets. So he's a knucklehead. Knucklehead wide receivers are not working out in the NFL. So Tony's just another one of the knuckleheads.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. Keep matriculating. How much of an uphill climb does Emmanuel Wilson have in order to make any fantasy contribution this season or in the future? I want to drop Wilson for Kobe Parkinson. The format is 6-point PPR Superflex Dynasty. RC, what do you think?
I am still a big believer in Emmanuel Wilson, the talent, but he has a gigantic uphill climb with all of the running backs that are in front of him. Josh Jacobs is in front of him. They drafted Marshawn Lloyd to be in front of him. They brought back A.J. Dillon, who will be in front of him. So Wilson's more in danger of not making the team, but that could end up being a good thing if somebody with half a brain in the NFL watched any of the preseason, or if the team that he destroyed in the preseason goes, let's get that guy that ran 80-yard touchdowns against us from the first touches he ever got. So he could end up falling into a good situation. So I'm not giving up on Emmanuel Wilson, but it's an uphill climb. There's probably not a lot of people that are going to be going after him once he hits your waiver wire, so you could always maybe pick him back up. Parkinson's going to be the starting tight end for the Rams, so that's something. If you need tight end help, and if tight end's a 1.5 premium, and you need tight ends, Parkinson's going to give you something. Wilson, if he remains with Green Bay, it's probably going to be on the practice squad or very deep as a kick returner and number 4 running back for another year.
Yeah, I think Packers-wise, Emmanuel Wilson getting meaningful playing time there is a long shot, but him getting picked up by another team, that would be interesting, and that's what you should hold out for if you do keep him on the roster. But I like RC's point too. Parkinson starting tight end for the Rams. I mean, that's definitely, that's not nothing.
It's something. So if this is a roster spot that's a pure free to do whatever, and you want to take if you were going to take a home run shot, you keep Emmanuel Wilson. If you're looking to get production because you have a tight end need, you take the single or the double with Colby Parkinson.
Okay, next one. Tim M. I was able to acquire Sam Laporta this offseason for a standard dynasty league and also have Kincaid and Goddard. Wow. And of course Jelani. So do I look to trade Goddard or let the Jelani dream go? RC, what do you think?
Do not let the Jelani dream go. I may eat those words, but I'm getting more and more good vibes on Jelani 2024. It's a perfect time to move off of Goddard because he's stuck in the fringe tight end 1 mud. You've already got 2 great tight ends that are going to be over him. Goddard, it's the right time with his age and that situation to just go ahead. He's still got a name value that people will acquire. So if you didn't have Laporta or Kincaid, I would say you gotta take the single or double with Goddard. Don't go for the grand slam with Jelani because we just don't know. Play it safe with Goddard. But with this tight end room, you have the luxury of going ahead and trading Goddard and keeping the Jelani dream alive.
Absolutely. I mean, Laporta and Kincaid, I mean, that's the future of the tight ends. I bet every team in that league is going to try to trade for one or the other. So, yeah, if you could hang on to both.
If Jelani gets back healthy, which we have video evidence that he is moving around fine and his hamstring issue from last year is behind him, Could always crop back up again, but we can't bet on that. So he's working out. He looks fantastic. If he is the starting tight end for the Colts, of which I think that he is, and you go read my report that I did released today about Anthony Richardson's 2023, watching all of his snaps back from last year, I did one report on just what Anthony Richardson looked like and how it translates into the future. But then I did a second report off of that got released today that looked at where all the targets went for Richardson statistically by the numbers, but then also what my eyes saw as I watched each of the 4 games that Richardson played. So I think you'd find it interesting what Richardson did with tight ends among his targets. And that's when they didn't have one, and they had 3 bad tight ends that they were rotating. So Jelani could be the starter, the main starter, not in a rotation. And if he is, I think he'll beat Dallas Goedert in 2024.
So, RC, I think Keep Matriculating is going to hate me for this because I feel like I'm going to put you off on a tangent and his questions next. But when you speak about Jelani, like, I don't know why I'm drawing this comparison, but do you think that Darnell Washington with Pittsburgh has some Jelani qualities? And with Arthur Smith there, could Washington get pushed to being used more than he did in his rookie season? Or do you view Jelani as way more athletic than Washington?
On paper, their combine workouts were fairly close, but I think Jelani might have beat him by a nudge. So on paper, similar. To my eyes, Jelani just looks way better. Moves better, moves with more burst and juice. Not that Darnell Washington can't be a tight end 1 in the right situation, but Freiermuth has the upper hand. You've got, is it going to be Russell Wilson? Is it going to be Justin Fields? You got Arthur Smith there. Is he going to rise Washington up like Jonnu Smith, like he did with Jonnu Smith last year for Atlanta? Or is he going to ignore him? Is Mike Tomlin going to keep him married to Freiermuth? There's just a lot of questions that swirl around for me for Washington. I wish he would get the chance, but I'm not counting on it like I am Woods, who I think through listening to the tight ends coach the last 2 years, they think that Jelani is the one. They're just dying because they can't get him onto the field. And not because he's not a hard worker and not because he's not in exquisite shape. He's just had a hamstring issue. He's had to go to a specialist like Christian Watson did to try to make sure he's over it. So I have more of what I've seen so far in the NFL. I have much more hope for Jelani. But Darnell Washington is a beast.
Yeah, he used to crush in Georgia, huge red zone target. So we'll see what happens with him. So let's go to Keep Matriculating's question. Thank you for your patience. 6-point PPR Superflex Dynasty QB group is Justin Herbert, Will Levis, Kenny Pickett, and Malik Willis. Want to drop Willis for Tyson Bagent, thinking Bagent has a better path to emerging behind Caleb Williams. What are your thoughts?
You can drop Willis for anything, or you can drop Willis for a blank spot, and you'll have the same result. I hope Malik Willis gets cut or traded and moved to a place where it makes more sense for him to be as a quarterback, where he can maybe get more developed. But then you're another year or so away from, if he does get developed, he'd be a neat backup for a Lamar Jackson if he could, or a Anthony Richardson if somebody could work with him and help him in a way that Mike Vrabel would never. So maybe there'll be a life with Willis at some point, but it's not imminent. So you're free to drop Willis. I don't see a path for him developing for a while. I don't think the Bears will go to anybody behind Caleb unless they all get fired and Caleb can't play. So I'm hopeful for Bagent, but it's not going to be easy. However, if in week 1 Caleb Williams, gets his fibula fractured, it's Tyson Bagent time. In Tennessee, if something happens to Levis, you're going to want Mason Rudolph, and then you don't really want Mason Rudolph anyway. So Bagent is closer to magic happening than Willis. I think Bagent is going to give Caleb some problems when the new regime comes in next year. If Caleb is a flop this year, and it becomes obvious, like with Bryce Young, when it started bad, people were still hopeful. Then by about midseason, everybody was like, "Oh crap, we got this one wrong." So it was so wrong on Bryce Young, it could very well everybody be that wrong about Caleb Williams. But Caleb Williams will have a different problem in that I think he's way too there's knucklehead wide receivers. Caleb Williams could be a knucklehead quarterback, and that's how he never lives up to any of his promise or potential. Bagent will be the one waiting in the wings. Bagent will be the one that'll be there at 4 a.m. Bagent will be there, will be the first one there, the last one to leave, sleep at the camp, and he's working out in between film sessions while Caleb Williams is off filming commercials and going to basketball games in the front row and going to baseball games and having a good time. Bagent is trying to Tom Brady his way to a starting NFL quarterback. So I think that will converge someday, and there will be a Bagent versus Williams call from the fans, but not now. But Willis versus Bagent is one injury away from having to be the guy. Willis is not the backup for Levis. It's Mason Rudolph.
Very cool. Bill in Texas. Jalen Petrie this season. Worried we'll get the 2023 version again. I want to keep him in Dynasty, but might swap him out for Bynum or Julian Love. Also have Blankenship and Melifonu rostered. What are your thoughts?
I'm good with either Bynum or Love. I'm intrigued by Mike McDonald in Seattle, so you could definitely lean Julian Love, but Bynum's been really good for Minnesota, and the same coaching staff is there, so you'd hope. Like, Petrie changed from being great for fantasy in 22 to being not great in 2023, but you had a whole changeover of a coaching staff and how they use guys and all that. We've got that with Julian Love. So if you're in a coin flip between Bynum and Love, you almost have to go with Bynum to play it safe because he's got the same stat. He produced DB1 numbers, safety 1 numbers last year with this coaching staff, and it's the same staff coming back. So Bynum's the smarter play, talent-wise, age-wise, and all that. They're probably pretty close. So Petrie in 2022, Petrie is better than all of them, but 2023 Petrie is not good for fantasy purposes. So I'm good with Bynum or Love, especially if those types of guys are available. Then you've always got safeties available to you. So you might even look at picking up both of them and dropping Melifonwu or maybe trading him because he got hot with Detroit last year when they didn't have hardly anybody in the secondary. I'm not sure what's going to happen with him. I think he's going to be fine, but I'm not sure what's going to happen with him now that they're bringing in new DBs into the fold. But I think Love and Bynum are safe. Blankenship should be okay. So these are all good names. So you're on the right vibe. And if something goes wrong, if something switches, something happens, it looks like there's plenty of talent on your waiver wire. So you're not going to make a decision you're going to ever regret or not be able to wiggle your way out of if it goes wrong.
Chris Primo, why did Jets draft 2 running backs? Are they going to play hard defense and run the ball old school?
That wouldn't surprise me. But I can't really say as to what they were thinking. Drafting one, Braylon Allen, to me was just smart. I think Braylon Allen's one of the 30 best running backs walking the face of the earth. So the fact that they got him in the 4th round is stunning. But then for them to take Isaiah Davis, who I also like, in the 6th round, I think it was 6th round or 7th, but I think it was 6th. That was a head scratcher in that, okay, what are you guys doing? I know these guys are talent, so they're sitting out there, so you grab them when Dallas could have gotten all of these guys but didn't. So are they going to go that route? I don't think Aaron Rodgers will let them. Aaron Rodgers is the one who runs that offense, so Aaron Rodgers is going to want to throw the ball. I think there seems to be some concern. I won't swear to this, but in conversations that I have, there seems to be some tension between Breece Hall and the coaching staff. So we're going into year 3 of Breece Hall. So next year he's probably going to be a holdout complainer for, an early extension. So they may be getting ahead of, we're not going to pay running backs a ton of money, is my thought on this. But it's not out of the realm of possibilities that they're going to go old school defense and run the ball. That would be smart of them to do if these offensive linemen that they got hold up. But it may be just more, those were talented guys for them to get, and it's going to be a Breece Hall problem maybe next year.
Tim M. Thoughts on Kenneth Walker? Is he primed for a top 10 non-PPR this season?
I'm a Zach Charbonnet guy. You got a new staff in there that isn't. Pete Carroll had his way. He was trying to get Charbonnet on equal footing with Walker. I think at best for Kenneth Walker, this is going to be a split of some kind, Walker with Charbonnet. Charbonnet's a better power runner. Charbonnet's a 10,000 times better blocker, and Charbonnet is better in the passing game. Walker is semi-liability in the passing game by comparison. So Charbonnet, to me, has the upper hand talent-wise. Kenneth Walker is more of a game breaker. You'd want to, in the new NFL, what I would want to do is run them as a duo and play hot hand and all that kind of stuff. But my favorite of them would be Charbonnet if I was the coach. So this new staff may see it the same way and it be an equal balance. And then if it's an equal balance, I don't know that you're going to get a top 10 anything from Kenneth Walker because he may not get the touches to do it. And then you being non-PPR, Charbonnet, the way Charbonnet is built versus Walker, you want Charbonnet to take the goal line carries, not Kenneth Walker. So you could lose. Kenneth Walker's not good for PPR because he's not great with his hands, and Charbonnet is, and Charbonnet is a better blocker, so he's in a lot on third down. But then Charbonnet could also be the short yardage guy, and Kenneth Walker wind up being that first and second down back that's up and down week to week, hoping he gets some kind of touchdown run in there to make his week worth it, but he winds up being an RB2 with RB1 weeks when he scores a touchdown, but a lot of RB3 weeks when he's 12 carries for 43 yards, like Brian Robinson was somewhat last year, as an example. So I'm not high on Kenneth Walker because of Zach Charbonnet.
Last question, RC. Keep matriculating. I confess wanting to associate in a small way with the Cross Harrison Butker carries. My concern is that he's made his craft harder and job security less sure, but are your expectations unchanged?
My expectations are unchanged. I had those thoughts at first, and I started to pull down his projections a little bit, thinking that's going to be a lot of pressure. But now that a couple days has gone by, and I'm surprised how many people have started to come to his defense in this. Like, it was a big deal the first day. One side of the aisle had the upper hand, and then the other side of the aisle came back in defense, and even some people from the other side of the aisle jumped over, like a Bill Maher, and other people were like, what are you doing to this guy? I mean, he was speaking to, a specific group. He didn't say anything that was radically crazy. What are you people doing? So I think the crazies got shut down in this, surprisingly. Crazies to me, in that you can disagree with them, but you don't have to try to dox him and have campaigns of we need to cut him from the team for some words that he said at a commencement speech that was targeted to a specific audience. So I'm shocked, but not shocked, that there was more of a reaction to Butker's words than there was Rashee Rice's Lamborghini or whatever it is that he tried to kill people with. So I had that thought day one, but as I've seen things play out, it looks like it's swinging back in his direction. And then as far as pressure goes, I mean, what's going to happen? He's going to go on the road and might hear some boos if anybody even paid attention or cared. I mean, the guy has been kicking in Super Bowls for 3 of the last 4 years. He's seen more pressure than some people booing. I don't think the pressure is going to come from within his own organization. I think one of the owners or an owner's wife or somebody owner's daughter came out in defense of him. So I don't think there's going to be any ramifications. And fortunately for him, he's on the Kansas City Chiefs, so he's like the 5th worst person this offseason doing things that people hate. So it'll take a while before you get down to the list of dealing with Harrison Butker for evil wrought onto society thoughts. So I think it's fine. It may even be to his benefit. It may embolden him even more.
Well, RC, that was our last question. Anything you want to say to the audience with what's upcoming with FF Metrics?
What do we got? We've got Wednesday. There is 2 new things hitting tomorrow. One is going to be a special report on a particular player. I'll just leave it at that. That I think you're going to enjoy, that went in a direction. It's a rewind report where I look back at a particular player's prior season that had some type of intrigue to it, or I wanted to verify my scouting thoughts one way or the other by just going back through their work and seeing what I saw and how it might translate to this upcoming season. I had a kind of a wild card, intriguing one that you're going to probably be surprised when you see who it is that I did a study on. And then it went in a different direction. There was some side notes on some players that I saw. There was the player I was studying, but then there's all the other players around them involved. And I caught some of the other players involved in this player study that really has changed my thinking on some fantasy things and some betting things that the betting stuff I'll get more into as the weeks develop. But it'll be an interesting one. It'll be a head scratcher when you see who it is, but it'll make more sense when you read through it. And then tomorrow also kicks off the faux computer simulated season, weeks 1 through 3. The records and the standings will be revealed for the first 3 weeks, and then every day after that, the next 3 weeks of gameplay and records and standings, all the way up to who's making the playoffs, who's going through the playoffs to get to the Super Bowl. That whole computer simulation kicks off. It's like a 12-part series, 10-part series till we get through the Super Bowl. That kicks off with weeks 1 through 3 tomorrow. And there are some surprises of who's undefeated.
Awesome. Well, that's really exciting stuff. Definitely looking forward to that report you were just mentioning too. But for the rest of us, thank you all for tuning in. Have a great night, and we'll be back to you guys next week with even more content.